with this new administration, I thought there'd be a lot of near-term volatility, not meaning up or down, just meaning bouncing around, but a lot of long-term. So I'm talking 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, bullishness, a lot of to the upside. So Donald Trump had this big campaign of America first. We need to care about ourselves. We need to focus on the American. We need to focus on our economy. We need to focus on our own production. That's highly inflationary. That implies a weaker dollar. There's no real clear path for this administration to get what they wanted without some pain first.
The financial system is shifting right before our eyes, and Jack Mallers is at the center of it all. With the US government reshuffling its economic playbook, liquidity drying up, and Bitcoin standing strong at $80,000, the battle between public sector control and private sector innovation is heating up. Jack Mallers has been one of the loudest voices predicting these changes, calling out the weakening dollar, inflationary pressures, and the inevitable rise of Bitcoin as the ultimate hedge. But what does this all mean for you? Is this the beginning of a major financial reset? And how can you position yourself for what's coming next? Stick around as we break down Jack Mallers' latest insights, the Treasury's bold new strategy, and why Bitcoin is poised to play a bigger role than ever. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is the type of information you don't want to miss. Now, let's get into it.
Scott Bessent, for those that don't know, Scott is a former hedge fund manager. He is our new U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, taking over for Janet Yellen. For those that have been listening to the show, I've paid particular attention to Scott, to the U.S. Treasury, and their behavior as of recent. They seemed to be tightening liquidity, almost trying to cause a recession on purpose. I said, with this new administration, I thought there'd be a lot of near-term volatility, not meaning up or down, just meaning bouncing around, but a lot of long-term. So I'm talking 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, bullishness, a lot of to the upside. Why do I think that? Why do I say that? Because Donald Trump campaigned on a weaker dollar. Donald Trump campaigned on reshoring production in the United States of America. I think what you're seeing globally is a lot of my country first. Okay. That's very inflationary. Let me explain. In order for a country to focus on itself, that means it wants to shore production of the stuff it consumes in its local economy. That means it wants to be competitive in exporting the things it's producing locally. That means, by definition, it has to be inflationary because you're spending a lot of money locally producing stuff, and you're also needing to have a weaker local currency to be competitive in the export business. Okay. So Donald Trump had this big campaign of America first. We need to care about ourselves. We need to focus on the American. We need to focus on our economy. We need to focus on our own production. That's highly inflationary. That implies a weaker dollar. Okay. Now, the question is, how were we going to get there? Right? It was, by the way, a weaker dollar, all of these things, inflationary tendencies is very good for Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I believe, always is the best expression of currency debasement. It's a put option on the existing system. It's long volatility. It's the best way to express that things are going to have to change. The current monetary regime we're in now isn't going to last. The dollar is going to go lower. Hard assets are going to reign supreme. A neutral reserve currency is where humans are destined to trade. That's, to me, what Bitcoin is. So this is very good for Bitcoin. The dollar is going to have to get weaker. And everyone around the world is starting to focus on themselves, their country first. Highly, highly, highly inflationary. Okay. The question is, how are we going to get there? And I made a speculative guess after the election that in the near term, it was going to be volatile and the long term is going to be bullish. And I made that because there was no real clear path for this administration to get what they wanted without some pain first. Now, we've already been experiencing this pain. And this is not particular to Bitcoin. This is not Bitcoin pain. This is economic pain. The S&P 500 has been getting killed. Mag 7s have been getting killed. I mean, stocks are down. Everything is down. Everything that people own is down. Why? It's because markets have been starved of liquidity. Okay. The real insight that I want to talk about that's now become fairly obvious because Secretary Bessent has been talking a lot and been giving us a lot of good quotes is that what he's claiming that, let me just pull up. I prepared some direct quotes. Treasury Secretary Bessent says economy could be, quote, starting to roll a little bit, end quote. He's admitting that he's very aware and arguably intending to push the economy to what he calls roll over, die off, correct, go down. Okay. That was his first quote. The second quote is the U.S. became addicted to government spending. Okay. He's in referencing to the government public investing in public market. So in the public sector. Okay. So he's talking about the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars that the government was spending within its own public sector, not the private sector, not businesses and local economy and small businesses starting in the United States, but the public sector of the United States. Okay. He then also said that the White House is heading off a, quote, guaranteed, end quote, financial crisis. Hilarious way to phrase that. He's implying that there was a guaranteed financial crisis supposedly conducted at the fault of the prior administration, but he's working hard to head off that financial crisis and protect you from it. So he's been talking a lot and really validating a lot of what I've been saying on this show and on this podcast. Let's dissect it a little bit. One, he's talking about the economy rolling because it's been addicted to liquidity in the public sector. At one point, government spending on itself was 25% of our GDP. Okay? 25%. If you looked at economic data over the last few years, it looked good, like from a high level. You're seeing economic growth, GDP growth. The problem was that growth was government spending on itself, was that there was a lot of money and a lot of investment, creating a lot of jobs and a lot of economic activity of government just spending money, who knows what, on what, but it was economically beneficial. Why? Because if the government's employing millions of people to do stuff, well, those millions of people, that money is going to end up at your Chipotle down the street, buying a house next door, going to end up going to the Chicago Bulls game. It's going to end up buying United airline flights and a vacation to the Bahamas. The money ends up in the economy. So it's a little bit weird. The economic data looked strong, but 25%, 1/4 of it was government spending in the public sector. Now, a reason that that's a problem is because you're investing a ton of money. 25% of your GDP, of your growth, is invested in a sector that's not producing anything of value. Okay. What has Elon Musk and Doge found out about the public sector and all they've been up to? They've been up to fuck all. They've been doing jack shit. They've been producing no value, no innovation, no growth for anyone. What do you think that does to things like our debt to GDP? You're constantly in a deficit. You're constantly spend, but you're investing in what Elon Musk is figuring out, departments that are doing like transgender surgeries on rats. Or, right? I mean, these departments are, absolutely losing money, spending it on nothing. Okay. And what Bessent is saying is the economy got addicted to overspending from government in the public sector that wasn't actually producing us growth. Okay. I've talked about this before. In the United States, debt to GDP is 130%. Globally, it's over 300%. Debt to GDP is, the best metric to look at. How much have we borrowed from our future? That's debt. Debt is pulling your future forward, spending it now, and hoping to arrive at the future with more than you have today, right? Period. So how much have we pulled our future forward to spend today versus how much growth are we producing to pay that back? Okay. At 130%, you've borrowed tremendously from your future and you're not producing enough growth to pay it back. So this new administration is all on, we need growth, we need growth, we need growth. And what Bessent is saying very obviously is our investment has been in the public sector, has been in the government. Government's not good at innovating, building real world value, and driving growth. It's not. In what they're doing now, very obviously, because they've gone on CNBC and said it, is we're going to let Elon Musk run rampant, cut all of the fraudulent garbage spending. And yes, we're going to market it as balancing the budget, making the government efficient. All these things are great. But the reality is, if we're going to be optimizing in a deficit, weakening the dollar, and spend, we have to get more efficient about that spend. And Bessent wants that spend to be in the private sector, not the public sector. He wants the billions and billions or trillions of dollars worth of investment not to go into the US government and people doing transgender surgery on rats, but he wants it into the private sector for people to build local manufacturing in America, for people to work on AI, for people to work on Bitcoin exchanges. That's the private sector, private businesses, startups, small businesses, growth, value, real economic data, not fake economic data. And so that what he's calling the economy starting to roll, because he says it's a detox. These are all direct quotes. Detox. It's starting to roll. It's a transition period. He's taking the liquidity out of the public sector, out of the government, fraudulent garbage, fake spending, just to prop up economic data and numbers, and he's drying it out. So Elon's firing everybody. They're cutting every single budget. Guys, that is going to have an effect on the real world economy. If you take a ton of money that was being spent, whether it was fraudulently and whether it was working on stuff that you didn't actually believe in, that money still bought Chipotle burritos. It still bought houses. It still bought Chicago Bulls tickets. It still bought vacations. It still bought airline flights. It still bought clothes. It still went on Target runs when the refrigerator was empty. It still met the real world economy, no matter who it was funneled through. So if you starve the economy, you take it out, you're going to get a borderline recession. You're going to get a dip in stuff. Reality of the situation. And they're rotating that liquidity into the private sector because their whole thing is, in order to reshore America, we need to give tax cuts, we need to deregulate, we need to invest locally and allow people to have incentives to produce here and build shit here. We want AI built here. Trump's like, we want all the Bitcoins mined here. Whether it makes sense or not, his policy is America first, highly inflationary, weaker dollar, private sector. Unregulate. Take away all the regulations. Take away all the taxes. Let the guys build. But in order for them to get there, they had to take the money out of the public sector. So that's why there's a lot of, government that hates this administration. They do. Because everyone's getting fired. Everyone's dumb bullshit budget and policies is getting cut. And the economy is going to take a hit in order for them to reposition. So my opinion has always been the same. And if you're a longtime listener of the show, you've done really well. We've been right on the ball. But now we're starting to get validation from the literal Treasury of the Secretary, which is he's saying, I know the economy is going to roll. I know we're going through a detox period. I'm literally rotating liquidity from the public sector to the private sector because we need growth and we need real value, real investment, real productivity. That's not going to come from the public sector. Of 1/4 of our economic progress can't be from the United States government. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything. With all that rant, we now are starting to see a weaker dollar. The dollar's gone straight down. Bitcoin has held this $80,000 mark. All eyes are on the S&P 500 because the government needs the S&P 500 to survive. It is the primary savings account for the American. It is the primary vehicle in which they collect tax receipts, right? Capital gains. People feel rich. They spend their wealth. They buy a house. They buy stuff. They pay capital gains. That's an income stream for the government to cover its expenses. So I do think April, May will start to turn up.